Don't stop. I need this, the widow cried as the cowboy held her inside his candlelit cabin. The storm had come without warning that November evening, turning the mountain pass into a wall of white. Margaret Chen pressed forward through the blizzard, her wagon wheels struggling against the deepening snow. At 57, she had made this journey dozens times before, but never in conditions like these. Her hands trembled on the reins, not just from the cold. It had been 8 months since Robert passed, and this was her first trip alone to sell her preserves at the winter market. Every decision felt heavier now, every risk more frightening without him beside her. Through the swirling snow, a light appeared. A cabin, tucked against the mountainside, its windows glowing warm against the darkness. Margaret guided her exhausted horse toward it, barely able to feel her fingers anymore. The door opened before she could knock. A man in his early 60s stood there, his silver-touched hair catching the lantern light, concern creasing his weathered face. "Get inside," he said firmly, already moving past her to tend to her horse. "This storm's only getting worse." Margaret stumbled into the warmth, her legs nearly giving out. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and something savory cooking. She stood dripping on the wooden floor, suddenly aware of how much she was shaking. The man returned, snow dusting his broad shoulders. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent his life working with his hands. "I'm Jacob Torres," he said, guiding her toward the fireplace. "Let me get you some dry clothes and hot coffee." "I should not impose," Margaret managed through chattering teeth. "I just need to wait out the worst of it." Jacob was already pulling a quilt from a cedar chest. "Ma'am, that storm's settling in for the night. You are not going anywhere until morning." As warmth slowly returned to her limbs, Margaret watched Jacob move about the cabin with practiced ease. He hung her coat to dry, poured coffee from a pot on the stove, and quietly added wood to the fire. There was something comforting in his methodical movements, a gentleness that contradicted his rugged appearance. "I have stew," he offered, ladling some into a bowl without waiting for her answer. "Been cooking all day." Margaret accepted it gratefully. The first spoonful brought tears to her eyes, not from the taste but from the simple kindness of it. How long had it been since someone had taken care of her like this? "I am Margaret," she said softly. "Margaret Chen. I was heading to Silverton for the market." Jacob nodded, settling into a chair across from her. "Those preserves in your wagon?" "Yes. Jams and pickles mostly. It is what I know how to do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the storm howling outside making the cabin feel even more like a sanctuary. Margaret noticed the careful way Jacob had arranged his space, everything in its place, the result of years of living alone. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. 15 years this spring," Jacob replied, his eyes distant. "After my wife passed, I could not stay in town anymore. Too many memories in every corner. Needed somewhere I could breathe." Margaret understood that completely. "It has been 8 months for me. Everyone keeps saying it gets easier, but I am not sure I believe them." Jacob met her eyes then, and she saw recognition there, a shared understanding that did not require explanation. "It does not get easier," he said honestly. "You just get stronger at carrying it." The words were more comforting than any platitude. Margaret felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been holding since Robert died. "People in town look at me with such pity," she continued, surprised at her own openness. "Or they avoid me altogether, like grief might be contagious. I feel invisible sometimes, like I stopped being a whole person when Robert died." "You are not invisible," Jacob said quietly. "You are just surrounded by people who are afraid of their own mortality. They do not know how to be around someone who reminds them that life is fragile." They talked deep into the night, sharing stories of their lost spouses, their children who lived far away with busy lives, the strange isolation that came with being widowed in a society that did not quite know what to do with them. Jacob spoke of his years as a ranch hand, the satisfaction of honest work, the peace he had found in solitude. Margaret shared her struggles with keeping the small farm running, her pride in her preserves, her fear that she was not enough on her own. "I wake up some mornings and forget he is gone," Margaret confessed. "I turn to tell him something, and the emptiness hits me all over again." Jacob nodded slowly. "I still set 2 cups out sometimes. 35 years of habit does not disappear just because the person does." Near midnight, exhaustion finally overtook Margaret. Jacob had prepared a small sleeping area near the fire, giving her his own bed while he insisted he would be comfortable in his chair. But as she lay down, the emotional weight of the day crashed over her. The storm, the fear, The unexpected kindness from this stranger, the first real conversation she had had in months where she felt truly seen and heard, it all overwhelmed her at once. Tears came, not gentle but wrenching sobs she had been holding back for months. She felt Jacob's presence before she saw him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand hovering uncertainly before gently touching her shoulder. "I am sorry," Margaret choked out. "I do not know why I cannot stop." "You do not need to stop," Jacob said softly. His arms came around her then, solid and sure, and Margaret let herself lean into the embrace. It was not romantic, just profoundly human, one lonely soul offering comfort to another. "Don't stop," she heard herself say through the tears. "I need this. I need someone to just hold me while I fall apart." And Jacob did. He held her while she cried for Robert, for the life she had lost, for the fear and loneliness that had become her constant companions. He did not offer empty reassurances or tell her to be strong. He just held her and let her be broken for a while. When the tears finally subsided, Margaret found herself still in his arms, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "We all need someone sometimes," Jacob replied. "There is no shame in that." They stayed like that until Margaret's breathing deepened into sleep. Jacob carefully covered her with the quilt and returned to his chair, keeping watch as the storm raged outside. Morning brought clear skies and a world transformed by snow. Margaret woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Jacob was at the stove, preparing breakfast with the same quiet competence he had shown everything else. "Roads should be passable by afternoon," he said, glancing over with a gentle smile. But no rush. Over breakfast, they discovered they were not so different. Both had grown children who called occasionally but lived their own lives. Both struggled with the silence of empty houses. Both wondered sometimes what purpose their remaining years held. "You could stop by on your way back from Silverton," Jacob offered as Margaret prepared to leave. "If you wanted." Margaret smiled. "I would like that." As she guided her wagon down the mountain, Margaret felt different. Lighter somehow. The grief was still there, it would always be there, but it no longer felt quite so crushing. Jacob had given her something precious, not solutions or false hope, just the reminder that she was not alone in her loneliness, that there were others who understood, that human connection could still surprise and sustain her. She did stop on her way back. And the next month when she went to market again. A friendship grew between them, built on honesty and shared understanding, two people who had learned that life's second acts could hold unexpected grace. They never did fall in love, not in any conventional sense. But they became essential to each other, anchors in the storm, proof that kindness and connection do not end just because youth does, that being seen and heard and held when you need it most is sometimes the greatest gift one person can give another. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of human connection and resilience. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences of unexpected kindness during difficult times. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.